Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are talking about what makes a good writer. Totally, all the time. We have students saying, I am not a good writer. So today we're talking about how to end the cycle that is sabotaging your students. It's a tale as old as time. You get a new class of composition students, and on day one, like you can just already tell by the look in their eyes that they don't think they can do this. They're already defeated. How do you reverse that when they haven't even started their first assignment, but they already don't think they can do it? Well, that is what we are going to talk about today. But before we get into that, just a couple of housekeeping things. This webinar is being recorded. You'll get access to that in the coming days. And then we will be taking chats, questions at the end of the webinar. So feel free to enter those at any time, but we will get to those after the presentation. But super excited for this topic specifically, and then also our guest we have specifically. Dr. Paris Ryan is one of our authors here at Kendall Hunt, and she's kind of known as the doctor of self-efficacy. She is a English professor in San Diego, and her research focuses on something every writing teacher cares about, which is helping students believe that they actually can write. Her doctoral work explores self-efficacy in first-year composition, and she has a book called Composing Composition that digs into scholarly writing and academic essays. She serves on the National Council for or the National Advisory Council for the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity in American Higher Education. And then she presents her research at conferences nationwide. So this is a passion point of hers, and I think it's something that resonates with quite a few composition instructors. And there's a lot of research behind it too. So, Dr. Ryan, I will hand it over to you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yay, thank you, Megan. And yes, I am so excited that you're all here today because this is definitely a topic that resonates with a lot of us. And that's that every semester you'll have at least one student, most likely more than that, who tell you, I'm not a good writer. And I'm always telling them, no, that's not true. That's not true at all. How much have you written today? And they'll tell me nothing. Or I only write songs, or I only write poetry. Well, one, writing music, writing poetry, that's writing. You are a writer then. But two, what else have you written? Have you written something on social media? Oh, yes, I have. You're a writer. Have you written a text message? Definitely. You're a writer. Have you written an email? Unfortunately, yes. Again, you are a writer. So I always try to remind students that you are a writer, but how can we end this cycle? Because they'll tell me I'm not. And so I'm really excited to get to share that with you today. And I will tell you the secret is self-efficacy. So let's delve into it. Megan, oh, there we go. So, Megan, you already got to introduce me. The only things that I will add is that when I am not working on writing, teaching, or going to conferences, which is always fun, I love to hang out with my three boys. My co-author is my Chihuahua Brody. He's in the picture. And then after I wrote this book, I actually adopted a Siamese cat and became a cat mom. He's sitting in this room. You might see him in a little bit. And of course, I have a son who is going to be 16 months later this month, who is also the love of my life. And we love to go to the beach, hang out, and do such things. So, before we get started into self-efficacy, I'm going to ask you a few questions. If it resonates with you to share it in the chat, please feel free to. If you want to write it down for yourself, please feel free to. Or if you just want to think about it and just ponder on how you feel, please feel free to. My first question is that cliched one we've all heard a million times. What would you do if you thought you could not fail? Now, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? It's no longer just a thought. You know you cannot fail. How would having this sort of fearlessness change our ability to succeed? And now, getting to the point of why we're all here, how can we use this type of mindset to help our students succeed in class? What can we do? So many years ago, it was probably just about a year and change after I'd finished my doctoral dissertation, which focused on self efficacy. I went to this premiere of a documentary. And at the premiere, there was this giant poster. And in the center, it asked the question, what would you do if you thought you could not fail? And all these incredible people from all walks of life, all ages, all interests, all accomplishments, wrote down so many incredible things. And it broke my heart to see all these things that they would do if they thought they could not fail. And my answer was very simple: nothing. There is nothing I wouldn't do right now if I thought I couldn't fail that I wouldn't do right now. And it wasn't to be inspiring. It wasn't because I was like, ooh, why not? Nothing's a great answer. It is a good answer. I wish everyone had said nothing and everyone went after their dreams. But it was because of self efficacy. I was not always this way. But when I understood self efficacy, I realized that it's not even that I thought I couldn't fail, it was that I knew I couldn't fail. And here's the problem that we see with our students, because they haven't always grasped self efficacy, and I don't blame them. I didn't even know what self efficacy was when I was in college. But students start the semester, it starts in 11 days for me. They start the semester convinced I'm going to fail because in their mind, I'm not a good writer. And like I said already, they've written. They've written even before my 8 a.m. classes with them, but they are convinced I am not a good writer. They aren't sure they belong in college. Maybe they feel I belong in college, but I don't belong in this classroom. The number of times we've heard them say, I don't belong here. This isn't for me. They aren't sure what they're going to gain from a class like ours. It's composition. I'm taking it because it's a general ed. I'm taking it because I need it for my major. I'm taking it because I need it to transfer. But what's the point? We live in a world of AI. At, at some point, we all know right now ChatGPT does not create the greatest essays, but it does create an essay pretty quickly. And to students, what's the point? AI, for better or for worse, is only going to get better. So why do I need to do this if I can have ChatGPT create an essay for me? What's the point of taking this class? And this one's the one that breaks my heart the most, and more of our students feel this way than I wish, but it's that they just want to survive. They don't want to thrive. I just need to survive this class. I just need to pass this class. I don't need to thrive in this class. And that always breaks my heart. I tell students every semester, we're together for 16 weeks, and we have two options. We can be miserable. We can hate every moment of it and be like, oh, I have to be in this class. Like, why? Or we can have fun. Let's enjoy it. And I always tell them my goal, let's have fun. Why be miserable? That sounds terrible. So we want to try to help them also learn how they can thrive in this class, not just survive. And we are all lifelong learners and we've been students for a long time. And I will say that we've probably felt one or even all four of these ways at some point or another, maybe even all in one class. I will tell you, self efficacy was my problem, not with writing. Writing was never my issue. I was always praised for my writing. I always got A's in writing. I always felt like I was a strong writer. But for me, it was in math. Everyone in my family was great at numbers. Everyone understood it, and I didn't. I was the girl who was eternally confused in math class, and I hated it. And it took me a long time to realize that numbers could actually be fun. And that all comes down to self efficacy. So let's go into a little bit of defining what failure is. What could it be? Well, the dictionary, Merriam-Webster, defines it as a lack of success. But I wouldn't disagree with Merriam-Webster. I would just say that it's not telling us the whole story. It's telling us only part of it. Yes, if I fail a class, I lacked success in that class. But there's so much more to it than just that. Because if I learned something from it, was it really a lack of success? In fact, Thomas Edison, who's one of the most famous examples of this, tried to make the light bulb over 1,000 times. And he's famously known for saying, I didn't fail at making it 999 times. I just learned 999 ways to not make the light bulb. But what if he'd quit after the first failure, the 100th failure, the 500th failure, the 999th failure? Well, we'd all be sitting here in the dark. But it doesn't matter how I define failure. It doesn't matter how Merriam-Webster defines failure. It doesn't even matter how Mr. Edison defines failure. What matters is how our students define it. So how do they? There are many different ways. It could be failing the class. Very easy. An F in the class, it's a failure. We failed. Not earning the grade they want. Oftentimes, it's not that the student actually failed the class. They passed the class, but they wanted an A and they ended up with a B. What if they drop your class 2 weeks into the semester and they're like, this is going to be too much. I'm dropping this class. What if they withdraw from your class 10 weeks into the semester and they're like, this is too much. I'm going to withdraw. Now all of a sudden they have a W on their transcript instead of a letter grade. What if they just don't take your class to begin with? I'll take it next semester. This is too hard. My semester's too busy for a class this difficult. What if they don't submit an assignment because they worry it's not good enough? And here's the saddest part, they usually don't tell you when they worry that it's not good enough and that they wrote something, but they didn't submit it. Maybe it was 3 paragraphs when it was supposed to be 3 pages, and they're embarrassed and they feel it wasn't good enough to submit. What if it's something like losing a scholarship? If I don't get a particular grade in your class, I'm going to lose this scholarship. Can I now afford to be in school? What if they're going to be forced off a sports team due to their grades? Again, their goal is to be an athlete. And all of a sudden, they're being told, well, if you don't do well in this essay, in your composition class, in your whatever class it might be, you can't do this. And they have to ask, well, what am I getting from this? Like, why do I need to learn how to write an essay? My goal is to be a professional baseball player or a professional hockey player or a professional soccer player or whatever else it might be. And they're being told no. There are so many ways, and we can spend this entire time talking about how our students would define failure, but it's really important for us to think about like how they define it, because each of them are going to define it differently, and that's going to impact how we work with them and how we help them succeed. And so, as we continue, I want to share a few more examples of people who have failed in the real world, but who've actually been some of the most successful people ever. So, Michael Jordan, well, as a sophomore, he was kicked off of his varsity high school basketball team. And he went on to be one of the greatest players of all time. And he said, I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. Vera Wang, one of the most famous fashion designers of all time. She has taken on the wedding industry. When a bride thinks of a wedding dress, she thinks of Vera Wang. But she originally wanted to be a figure skater. And in 1968, I believe, she didn't make it into the US Olympic team. So she pivoted and she decided, I'm going to be a fashion editor. And she got pretty high at, I believe, Vogue. But when she was passed on for editor in chief, she decided to pivot again. And in her 40s, she became a fashion designer. And a lot of people were like, you're too old for this. How can you do this? And yet, she is a force to be reckoned with. And she said success isn't about the end result. It's about what you learn along the way. And then Colonel Sanders, well, he had a fried chicken recipe that he kept trying to franchise out. Over and over and over again, he was rejected. Nobody wanted it. Well, in his 60s, he decided, you know what? I'm going to start a little something called Kentucky Fried Chicken, and became one of the most successful fast food chain founders ever. And he said one has to remember that every failure can be a stepping stone to something better. And all three of these examples, Thomas Edison as an example, all of them are perfect examples of why failure isn't really a lack of success if you learn something from it. So, what's our solution? I already told us this earlier, but our solution is very simple. It is self-efficacy. And so, what is self-efficacy and why would this be the case? Well, self-efficacy isn't just this wishy-washy optimism. I live in California. We definitely have a lot of pseudoscience, and some people love the woo-woo stuff, and some people are like, nope, I need something science-based. Well, what I love about this is whether you love woo-woo stuff like me, I will be honest, or whether you're like, I'm looking for scientific stuff, which I'm also always looking for, this is it. It's research backed. It's scientific methodology. It can and it will help our students succeed. It isn't just this optimism of, oh, well, I'm going to be successful at this. It is so much more than that. And again, what is it? Because many of you are probably sitting here being like, I know exactly what it is. I know what you're talking about. And many of you might be like, I was many years ago. What is self-efficacy? I have no idea. But you probably already know what it is as a definition. You just didn't know it had a word to it. So, according to Albert Bandura, self-efficacy is a person's particular set of beliefs that determine how well one can execute a plan of action in prospective situations. And the way I like to always say it is it's my inherent belief in my ability to succeed at something. And the fact that if I believe I'm going to be successful at it, I'm probably going to try just a little bit harder. If I go into a composition class saying I'm going to get an A, probably going to spend a little bit more time trying to get that A because I already believe I'm going to get it. Whereas if I walked into a math class saying, "Oh, just survive this class, just survive this class," probably going to put a little less effort into that class. So who was Albert Bandura? Well, he was a Canadian American psychologist. He was a professor of social science and psychology at a little school here in California called Stanford University. And he was also the originator of not just the theoretical construct of self-efficacy, but also the originator of the social learning theory and the social cognitive theory. And actually, he just passed away a few years ago in July of 2021. So now we're going to go into some research-backed strategies, the ways that we can utilize self-efficacy in our classroom. But as I tell students every semester, I am not your sage on the stage. I am your guide on the side. I am not the bearer or keeper of all answers. I am learning just as much. And so I would really encourage you all, please share if you have any ideas for strategies to help our students increase their self-efficacy into the chat. I would love to see those, learn from you, and see if any of ours match or if there's anything that we can learn from each other as well. So the first one that I always say is bite-sized assignments. Plenty of journal prompts, free writes, versus mostly essays and projects. And this is because when we have shorter assignments, like a journal. That student who wrote 3 paragraphs instead of a 3-page essay, and so they were like, I can't submit this, it's only 3 paragraphs, and it was supposed to be 3 pages. Well, the journal prompt might only need to be 1, 2, or 3 paragraphs long, and all of a sudden it's like you've already done it. It's much harder to procrastinate and not write something that's shorter. Also, as I always tell students, shorter writing is harder. Being concise is harder. And so, whether they know it or not, they're actually doing the harder thing of trying to write something in a more concise manner. Also, think of readings. If I tell a student, read this 500-page book in the next 5 weeks. Okay, about 100 pages a week. It's a lot, but it's doable. We can do that. But that's a lot. Now imagine if I tell them in the next week, can you read this 3-page article, this 2-page short story, and this 1-page poem? It feels a lot more doable. The other big thing with this that I like to remind people of is a journal prompt or a free write is not going to be worth as many points as an essay or a project in your class. So if I don't submit a journal prompt and it's worth only like 1 point out of 100, I'm okay. It'll be fine. If I don't submit an essay that's worth 10, 15, 20 points out of 100 in your class, yeah, I've changed my grade by a letter grade or two. So it's definitely something that we want to be mindful of. The next one is progress over perfection. Again, submit something over submitting nothing. I always tell students, whatever you have, submit it, because I can't give you feedback on nothing. If you've only written those 3 paragraphs, submit it. That way I can at least give you feedback. So the next paper or the next thing you do, you have a little bit of something. And lastly, and this is probably the one that I think is most important, understanding their why. Why are they scared to write? Why do they believe they're not a good writer? What made this belief into a reality? How can we change it? Why? Getting to the heart of it. And honestly, sometimes we don't even know our whys when it comes to like having low self-efficacy in something. But being able to understand their why is so crucial. Because the student who comes into your class and failed this in the spring, they failed your English 1A, your English 101, whatever like your composition class is called, they failed it in the spring. They're going to have a very different why for why they're nervous about this class than your student who's failed it the last 5 semesters. Maybe this is the last time they can actually take it because you failed it so many times, we're not allowing you to retake it if you fail it again. And they're going to feel very different for why they're nervous than the student who's like, I have never written an essay before in my life. I have no idea where to begin how to do this. All three are really valid reasons for why they're nervous to be in your class. And all three are so vastly different for why they are nervous and how we can help them. So we're going to pivot a little bit into a very similar topic to self-efficacy. It goes hand in hand with it. It's something we're all really familiar with, and it's imposter syndrome. So let's define it really quickly. What is it? Well, Oxford Dictionary says the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. Basically, it's I don't belong in this room. I shouldn't be here. The hard work and dedication I've put into this, well, no, I don't belong here. And how exactly does it impact our students? Creates self-doubt. I don't belong in college. I don't belong in this classroom. Procrastination. I'll take this class next semester. I'll finish working on this paper tomorrow. I know it's due in 2 days, but I'll work on it tomorrow. Perfectionism. This isn't good enough. This essay is a little too off topic. I haven't written enough to make it worth submitting. This isn't this isn't worthy of being submitted. Self-criticism. If I were better, I would have had better time management skills. I would have done a better job with making sure that I wrote a little bit every single day for the last month to submit this essay. Or even if I were a better writer, I could have pulled an all-nighter and done this. And the fear of failure. Again, oftentimes we don't think of failure as, well, what did I learn from this? Because it's not fun to fail. It's not. And we're not sitting there being like, well, I know Thomas Edison and I know Michael Jordan and Vera Wang and Colonel Sanders and so many other people have been successful. We don't want to fail. It's not fun. And it's this fear because sometimes it can feel like it's really high stakes. Losing your scholarship, having your GPA change because you failed a class or you didn't get the letter grade you wanted, having to explain a W on your transcript when you transfer to another school or even when you go to grad school, those can be really scary, high stakes things for our students. And this is really important for us to think about. Who does it impact? Who does imposter syndrome impact? Everyone. We've all felt imposter syndrome at some point in our life. Again, maybe it was in a composition class, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was in another class. Maybe it was when you sat on a table for something else entirely. But we've all likely felt imposter syndrome at some point in our life. And the irony about imposter syndrome to me is that the people who feel it the deepest are almost always the people who belong there the most. Our students forget that they are only in our class because they are capable of being successful in our class. They've completed they've completed different classes that let them do this. They've completed exams that place them in our class. They've applied and gotten into schools. They are worthy of being in our class. They belong in our class. They are capable of being successful in our class. But imposter syndrome, it tells them, no, I'm not worthy of this. I'm not capable of this. I shouldn't be here. And why is it important? Why is it important to be aware of imposter syndrome? Because it creates these past experiences and beliefs that impact our future experience and beliefs. So our past experience of student A is like, I failed this class in the spring. Their experience was I failed. Their belief is I'm going to fail. They come into your class this fall, they're going to say, why would it be any different? Why wouldn't I fail? So let's look at some research. What is the research telling us? Well, this was in my dissertation. It's also in the book, The Thinking Problem, but it's a self-efficacy framework where we look at the student's past, their present, and their expectations. And so let's take a good example of this, okay? You have student A who had Professor A last semester in the spring. Student A failed Professor A's English 1A class. Student A's perception of their prior teacher's effectiveness is that Professor A was not very effective. They failed the class after all. Student A believes that Professor A just gave them a book and told them read it and write. They didn't actually teach them. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. That doesn't matter. That's not the point of this. The point of this is that student A believes that their perception of their prior teacher's effectiveness, not good. That's going to impact their self-efficacy when it comes to writing. And then you look at variables A, things like self-apprehensiveness and their self-assessed level of preparation, things that can change pretty easily. And so they're likely going to come in and be a little more self apprehensive. I know I would be if I just failed a class. It would be a little scarier to take this. And I definitely wouldn't feel very prepared, especially if I felt that my prior teacher wasn't effective and I failed the class. That's also going to impact them along with variables B, things that are less likely to change. Things like their ethnicity. Are they a first generation college student? What is their gender identity? Are they a first or second generation immigrant? Are they an English language learner or a native speaker? Do they write for pleasure? Do they read for pleasure? And so those things are going to impact their self efficacy. And altogether, those are going to impact their outcome, how they're going to do in our class. And that ties back to their expectation. So if student A already feels teacher A was not very effective, they're coming in pretty apprehensive, they're not really sure they're very prepared, and they come in and then we see their outcome is they get a C. Well, maybe their expectation was, I just hope I pass. Okay, great. They made it. Or maybe they get a D this time instead of an F. And they're like, well, this isn't very good. I wanted a slightly higher grade. So we can see how those will connect with each other, and we really want to help them change that. And so our job is to help them change that apprehensiveness when they're in our class so that they feel a little stronger. So that when they come in, even if they're like, I'm not a good writer, they leave the semester being like, I'm a good writer. And it doesn't have to do with us saying, everyone gets an A, here you go. We don't have to be Oprah here, being like, you get a car, you get a car, you get an A, you get an A. No, we want them to earn that A because otherwise it's not helpful for them either. If we give them an A and next semester they're in the next class and they're like, well, I went from English 1A to English 1B, and I have no idea what I'm doing because Professor A just gave me an A. That's not helpful either. But instead, if we can change that mindset, that apprehension, then we can help them have a stronger outcome. And then their expectation is going to get beaten from their outcome. Instead of having the expectation of, like, I hope I don't fail again because I think I will, they're going to all of a sudden be like, I did really well. I got a B in this class. Like, I feel really good. And they're going to come into the next class being like, okay, like maybe they're not saying I'm a great writer yet, but they're like, okay, I can do this. I'm an okay writer. I'm a good writer. I can do this. I think I have faith. And the other thing the research is showing is the motivation theory. So this is also in the book, and it basically talks about those low risk assignments. So again, those bite-sized assignments, so like short academic readings, short writings, combined with things like positive teacher feedback, instruction that like students are interested in, and a focus on their background, their home life, their culture. It's going to positively impact these students' success because it'll improve their self-efficacy. And so why is that the case? Because if we have those bite-sized assignments that aren't worth too much, and they're like, okay, there's a bunch of those that they do. So they're constantly working on their writing muscle by writing, and writing. They're doing assignments that aren't too scary because even if I don't do well on it, it's okay. I'm not going to fail this class. They have positive teacher feedback. I always love my grading sandwich. Something positive, something constructive, something positive again to remind them what you did was great. You put in effort into this. There's constructive feedback. There's always constructive feedback that we can share, but you still did great. Combined with instruction that they're interested in, which can be the hard one. But again, having a diverse array of different sorts of content that you use in your class can help. Utilize music videos, songs, short stories, poetry, articles, different types of content that's there so that students can find something that they find that they're interested in. And of course, knowing who the student is. What's your background? What's your home life? What's your culture? If I know that I teach an 8 a.m. class and the student has been working the night shift, they might be really tired in my class. Maybe that's why they're really exhausted and finding it hard to pay attention. If I know a student hasn't eaten lunch yet and it's lunchtime and they're never eating before they come to my class, maybe they're distracted because they're really hungry. Maybe it's also not something that's consistent like those examples, but they got into a really big fight with someone they love last night. Maybe it was their significant other or a parent or a child or a friend. And so they're just not there today. They're focused on something else. But there's so many different things. And if we understand those and we really try to focus on those, we can help our students increase their self-efficacy because we can see how can we help you? And why does this matter? Again, I'm all about the why. Why is this important? Because it helps us ensure that our students will succeed in our class. We want them to grow as writers, as critical thinkers. That's really important and a big part of composition. It's not just ChatGPT saying, here's an essay for you. It's not just writing that, it's understanding critical thinking. We want them to know that we care about them, like, and their success, not just that they're a student in our class and we graded their essay, but that we care about them as people. We care about their success, their dreams, their hopes, their goals. And we want their self efficacy to be increased. And so that comes down to the thinking problem. So this was a book that I wrote a few years ago. And when I was in grad school, this was kind of my big passion. I had spent most of my life thinking to myself, well, I am not good at math. I mentioned it earlier. My mom actually has a degree in math, so I should have been good at math. But I did not believe I was. I was like, I can't do math. I am not good at this. Everyone in my family is great at numbers. This isn't for me. Well, when I started my graduate program, I remember going in and telling myself, I'm going to do a purely qualitative research method. It's self-efficacy, it's writing, that's easy. Don't ask me to do mixed methods. I don't want to do that. That requires math. And definitely don't ask me to do quantitative research. That sounds horrible. I can't do that. And I was so sure and so certain when I went in. Well, 2 years in, I took my qualitative research methods class and I hated it. Qualitative research was just really boring to me. I was not a fan. And I was really worried for that break between my qualitative research methods class and my quantitative research methods class. What am I going to do? I don't enjoy this. And I now have to do a dissertation that's going to focus on at least one of these, if not both. Well, I took my quantitative research methods class. And on the first day, it was like a 4 hour long class one evening. And on the first day, I remember our instructor gave us an assignment. She gave us a problem to solve. So I sat there, I solved it, and I was like, this has to be wrong. There's no way it's correct. Well, when we shared with our partners, I showed her what I got, and she showed me what she had, and they were different. And I was like, yours is probably right. Mine has to be wrong. And she told me the exact same thing, but she was the only one who was correct. I had answered the question properly. I just didn't believe I could. As I continued working that evening, I started understanding that there was just one little thing I had missed every time. I hadn't believed I was good at this. And so each time as I was going over it, I didn't think I actually understood how to do math, but it was always like I was missing one little tidbit. And now that I'd gotten it, I was understanding this. Math was, dare I say, fun. I like numbers. I used to always say essays were fun. Like, let me write an essay. That sounds like a great time. And now I was like, math is fun. I really enjoy math. And so I ended up asking to do a purely quantitative research method for my dissertation. And I fell in love with numbers. But I'd spent 25 years not getting to enjoy numbers as much as I could have because of my thinking problem. And so with my dissertation, I focused on it with students in a composition class, like the ones I teach. And I always knew I wanted to make it into a book because nobody wants to read a dissertation. Nobody does. They're not exciting. I wanted to create digestible research that was easy for us to understand and to like learn from. And so why this book? Well, because it's split into two parts. The first half of it looks at things like confidence, self-efficacy, imposter syndrome, the fear factor, and other people's self-efficacy, because it's very easy to forget that we all have self-efficacy that might be low or high in different areas. When we're thinking of self-efficacy, we're thinking of ourselves. And there's digestible research. Again, I want something that doesn't feel like, oh, this is so academic and heavy, I have to process it, but rather something that it's like, oh, that's a really interesting fact, or that's a really interesting statistic that you can see in each area so that students can begin thinking about their why. And the second half, which is probably my favorite half, there's 101 journal prompts, and that helps them delve into their why. Why do I feel this way? Because, like I said, oftentimes we don't know why we feel this way. I never knew why I didn't like math. I just assumed, math's boring. Why would I like math? Plenty of the world loves math. But I just believed it was boring. I couldn't love it because I didn't know my why. And my why was that I hadn't understood how to answer things. And so this lets them delve into their why. It helps them increase their self efficacy. And what I love is that if I'm teaching a class that's 15 weeks long, I can have them do 15 to 30 of these journal prompts over the course of the semester. And for that one student who tells me, this is why I feel this way about your class, which is awesome, love it, please always do. I have like 99% of my students not telling me. Like, I'm nervous because, I'm worried because. This allows me to kind of get a sneak peek into how they're feeling. Why are you nervous? What makes this hard for you? And these journal prompts are that perfect bite-sized assignment that they do. They practice their writing, and I'm able to see, why are you nervous about this? And every chapter, so those 5 chapters that I mentioned earlier, they're filled with information regarding that topic, a short story that allows them to see this topic with a real world example, workbook questions and a quiz. Again, I love these workbook questions because at the end of each chapter, I'm able to see, why do you feel this way? How do you feel about imposter syndrome? What's your self-efficacy in our class? And there's a rule that starts off the chapter, and there's a breakdown of the key points at the end of the chapter. So again, if you're reading through it and you're like, I need to just get through this quickly, like I've read it already, but what's a glimpse that's there as well. And the first 4 chapters, so you're looking at confidence, self-efficacy, imposter syndrome, fear factor. Each of those areas also gives 10 ways that you can work on improving that. So if a student says, hey, I'm really, really struggling with my imposter syndrome, like I don't feel like I belong here, well, look at that chapter. There's 10 different ways that you can work on it. Compared to a student who's like, I just have really low confidence with this, there's 10 ways that you can work on that as well. And that's because we know self-efficacy is the secret to our success. It's Writing is a thinking problem. Math for me was a thinking problem. We all have something that was a thinking problem, not a teaching one. So I'm going to go back to those questions I asked earlier. I want to know, now that we've discussed this, what would you do if you thought you could not fail? And what would you do if you knew you could not fail? I hope your answers have changed. I hope you know that with this mindset, you know you cannot fail. Thank you so much for joining me this morning / this afternoon to chat about this. And if you are on recorded watching this, hi, thank you for watching it. And now I'd love to open up the space for any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Ryan. That was fantastic. I love the kind of sentiment about like breaking things up, helping students understand their why, things like that. We have a couple of questions here in the chat. Professor Goldberg would like to know, do you see a difference between dual enrollment students, such as middle college, and traditional first-year students when it comes to self-efficacy?
Yes, perfect. So thank you so much, Professor Goldberg. And so we were asking about middle enrollment students between first year and can you repeat that again?
Yeah, dual enrollment students, such as like a middle college, and traditional first-year students. Is there like a difference between self-efficacy that you tend to see?
Yes. So I have taught students of all ages from like high school students to I work in a community college now and I love it. That's where I am. But I've also taught like doctoral students and masters, doctoral candidates, master's students and such. And I will tell you, there is a very big difference between how they feel. It's similar to what I said earlier about the fact that whether you failed this class last semester or you've never written an essay before, those are different reasons why you're having low self-efficacy. But I will say a lot of times with our students at a community college, the reason that the reason they're really nervous is a lot of them, they haven't written an essay in years. They've never written an essay. Oftentimes they're juggling multiple things, and so they also don't always have the same time to be able to focus on what they're doing. So they're juggling a full-time job, being a caregiver to like a parent or raising a child, um, and they're trying to take these classes. And we all know, like when you're trying to work a full-time job, being like a full-time student, it's a lot and it can be really hard. And so oftentimes they're just really juggling a lot of things and they have to see what is my priority. And they also have to see how can I really ensure that I'm successful at this because a lot of times they're like, I haven't done this in a long time. I hope that answers it. And please continue writing in the chat if I haven't fully answered anything.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Paris. Carol says, I'm retired and teach statewide online courses only. It's more difficult to do some of this in an online course, kind of some of the self-efficacy exercises you were talking about, especially in a course I haven't designed. Any suggestions?
Oh, Carol, I completely understand. I have been teaching remotely online for the last 5 years, and it was definitely easier when we first had Zoom, because at least I got to like see someone. Like even if their screen is off, I'm like, there's another human being on the other side. When it's fully online, you sometimes don't ever see them, which is really hard. And that's where what I find can be really helpful is having journal prompts like this and questions like this that you have them answer, because you can kind of get a little sneak peek into who they are. You can say, hey, like, how do you feel about writing? And they can answer that, and you're able to get a little bit more of an understanding of why they might feel that way. If you're also in a course which you haven't designed and you're like, I don't think I can add anything to it, like adding a book right now to have these types of questions would be too difficult. The other thing you can do is you can create something, maybe you can have them do a free write that they submit every day. Just say like, hey, if we would normally meet twice a week in person. So I want you to answer 2 free writes a week. Like you submit it, it's just kind of for me to know and ask them questions like this that can really help you understand like why they might be feeling this way. And then the biggest thing, and this can really be challenging and difficult sometimes, because again, when you have online students, they are usually really busy. They are usually working that job during the day. So it's really hard even to find like office hours that work for everyone. But one of the other things you can do is you can really just try to email them individually and get to know them. Sometimes you will get ignored, I will be honest, and you won't hear back from them. But more often than not, they will respond to you and they will chat with you a little bit about who they are and things like that. So I hope that helps.
Excellent. JP says, great presentation. Can you briefly discuss writing anxiety and fixed mindset as barriers to self-efficacy?
Oh,
And
JP,
then,
oh,
oh yeah,
please.
yeah. And then, what are some pro tips for improving self-efficacy for students affected by these other factors?
Perfect. Okay, JP, I got so excited about this that I started saying like, "Oh, fixed mindset, growth mindset. I love this." So really quickly, we all know, growth mindset is that belief that, hey, I like I might not have been successful at this, but I'm going to try, and try again. It's what all those examples I gave earlier, all those people have. Thomas Edison, Vera Wang, Colonel Sanders, Michael Jordan, they all believe in growth mindset. Fixed mindset is this was really hard. I failed this class. I'm not going to ever try again. Um, and so the the difficulty with when a student has that fixed mindset is they're not understanding and recognizing that if they are able to really improve and learn from their failures, that they can be successful. They are worried that I failed right now and that's that. And I understand it because when I was in college, it did feel like that. A failed class felt like the ultimate, oh my God, what do you do? Or even just not getting the grade you wanted felt like, oh my God, what do you do? And this is going to affect graduate school. This is going to affect so many things. It's a lot different looking at it as a teacher where I say, hey, it doesn't matter. Like, does it suck to fail a class? Of course. But did I learn from it? That's what's important. And that's one of those things that we really want to do with self-efficacy. It's to remind them that we can learn from this, that we can improve and get better. And so Megan, I'm going to have you repeat because I am such a visual learner, not an auditory learner. I know JP had asked about pro tips, I believe, and about the fixed mindset. Can you repeat it again?
Yeah, specifically in regards to like writing anxiety and fixed mindset specifically as barriers to self-efficacy.
Perfect. So with writing anxiety, which students have often, even the ones are pretty, who are really great at it and they don't have that fear of like, I'm not a good writer, they oftentimes have that worry. Even the ones who are oftentimes English majors and they're like, if they're doing things like creative writing, they're like, I can't do composition. Like, this is so different. And so I would say some of my pro tips for that is again, getting to know their why. Who are they? Why are they feeling this way? What can we do? Really teaching them about that idea of growth mindset. Really teaching them that failure is not a bad word. Failure is not a bad thing. Again, using things like those journal prompts can really help because if you're able to have them really delve into their why, because more often than not, we don't know what it is ourselves. We we might have that fixed mindset in an area, but we don't even realize we have that fixed mindset. We're just worried. We're just like, I can't do this. And so, really getting into that heart of the why can really help. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to dig deep, journal, 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 try to understand your why as best as you can, and really understand the benefits of being able to like the benefits of failure because it's not a bad thing. It can be a great thing.
Absolutely. We've got some really wonderful advice in the chat that I'd like to call out too, kind of as like additional like brainstorming ideas. Angela is saying that for online feedback specifically, she likes to use audio feedback in addition to written feedback because sometimes it helps her to more effectively kind of communicate that progress over perfection idea.
I love that. And also with writing, you can't sense your tone. And so with an audio, you get that. And it can make it feel a little more like, okay, I'm having a conversation with you. So I love that, Angela.
Um, then Professor Goldberg or Bob, who he's just informed me, has talked about the idea of zero drafts. So just scribbling ideas without thinking about them, and before you know it, you've got this nugget that you can expand upon. And then Misty kind of had something similar. And in her technical writing class, they have a really rough draft one and a really rough draft two before they even get to the official rough draft. And I love that idea.
I love that too because writing is all about rewriting and just keep writing, writing, writing more. I always tell students it's okay. You submit a paper, expect that there's going to be something that we could have improved upon. That doesn't mean you won't get a perfect score. Like, that's not the end all be all. And just know that, like, a year from now, you're going to look back at that paper and be like, there's all these ways that I'd improved on it. But in that moment of time, at some point you have to hit publish. And in that moment of time, you're like, I think I'm good. I think we're done. And that's okay. Just keep writing and rewriting.
Absolutely. All right. Well, here's another good one. Sheila says, I also find that in the first class, emphasizing writing as a skill versus a talent also helps. I
100%. 100% Sheila, because writing is a muscle. I always tell students that it's something we are working on improving. And just like when we go to the gym to work on our muscles, you're you have to work on it. It's a skill. It is not a talent. It is a skill that we are constantly working on strengthening. So I love that.
absolutely. Well, that looks like that's all the questions that we have for today. Thank you again, everyone, so much for attending. Wonderful time having you all. I really enjoyed all the additional ideas in the chat as well. Thank you, Dr. Ryan, so much for this wonderful presentation and just your expertise and research that you've done on self-efficacy. Really appreciate your time and expertise today. And then just a reminder, everyone will be following up with you in the coming days with the recording to this. And until then, we hope you have a wonderful day and start your classes strong. Thanks again,
Thank
Paris.
thank you all so much for being here. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to continue this chat outside of this as well. And like Megan said, have an awesome, awesome fall 2025. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.